Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone at Will Stone CFB on Twitter. And folks, it is game week for your fighting Texas Aggies. College football, we got a little taste this past weekend with week 0, Florida State, Georgia Tech. We'll touch on that later. But this is the real deal is this weekend. And Thursday's got a couple games. Friday, a little bit lighter. But Saturday, man, it is jam-packed. You have Georgia Clemson at 11. You have Florida and Miami at 2:30. You get A&M and Notre Dame at 6:30 on ABC. College game days in College Station. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler on the call. Um, I, if you can't get excited for this weekend as an A&M fan or as a college football fan, it's not for you. You're in the wrong sport. You're in the wrong business. So, real quick, if you're new here, like us, subscribe to us on Apple, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, at Ineligible Pod. You can follow me. I have very mediocre takes on Twitter at Willstone CFB. Although I will toot my own horn, as if I don't, no one else will. Sold Florida State last week in our buy-sell hold. Thought they lost quite a bit. Did not think they were the number 10 team in the country, and they lost in week 0. So we're 1 for 1. So just that's probably as good as we're going to get all year. We're batting 1,000 right now. So lots to get into today. We have depth charts from Notre Dame and A&M both coming out today. Didn't think we'd even get a depth chart, to be quite honest, with as secretive as Mike Elko has been throughout his tenure here so far. But we got one. I've got some thoughts on that. Some thoughts on what Notre Dame is doing. I don't think we've touched on their offensive line situation up there because it was kind of in flux after the injury to starting left tackle Charles Jagasaw. Yeah, there's a lot to get into. Every Monday night and Wednesday night from now until I guess until my son is born. If you didn't know that, my wife and I are expecting our first child November 26th, days before the A&M and Texas game, Lone Star Showdown. So until he arrives, we're doing this show every Monday and Wednesday. So we'll figure out after that whenever that gets here. So, but yeah, big show. Robert Behrens is joining the program on Wednesday to give some season predictions. I'll of course talk about this game with A&M and Notre Dame. I'm gonna try on most weeks against a big time opponent like a conference game or like a pretty good opponent. Try to get someone on from the other team and have a little bit of different perspective and that sort of thing. So I feel like we had Ryan Roberts on a few weeks back. Got some good Notre Dame talk there. Yeah, this week is just kind of homering it up. We're gonna have Robert on, and try not to go overboard. Like this is as high as it gets. Days before the season starts. So the Kool-Aid is flowing. Everyone's optimistic. Everyone's undefeated, except for Florida State. Things are great right now. But let's jump in and talk about this game. So there's so many interesting storylines around it, and we've talked about it a lot. But Mike Elko, first game in College Station after the 6 years of Jimbo Fisher, pulling the trigger on that buyout, all that sort of things. The A&M program couldn't sit through a lame duck year. They had to get rid of Jimbo. They had to bring in someone that could kind of steady the ship and ease everyone's anxiety and just get this thing organized. And I think they've got that with Elko. We're going to find out a lot this weekend. And if A&M loses, this is not the end of Elko's era. I can promise you that. It's not a must-win game. It'd be great. It'd be a great way to start, but it's not. If A&M comes up short, do not start selling your Mike Elko stock. I think that's going to make you look foolish. But here we are. So Elko has coached at Notre Dame and at A&M. Played against Notre Dame last year as the head coach of Duke, and nearly took them down. College Game Day was also at that game. The first time that Duke had ever hosted College Game Day. And Elko's quarterback is the quarterback for Notre Dame now that we're playing on Saturday. So So it's a lot going on. But let's talk about A&M's depth chart first. There are still quite a few oars on this list. If you don't know what that means, or you're not privy to college or NFL depth charts, especially in college, like in NFL, like they'll tell you who's starting. Like there's no secrecy there. For some reason, college teams feel a need to hide as much information as possible and try to, throw some smoke screens. And in a few cases, it is warranted. There's one we're going to talk about in a minute that is warranted as far as A&M is concerned. But a lot of oars. So, for example, at right tackle, you have Demetrius Crownover or Ruben Fothery. They're not announcing a starter at this time. And all the oars are in alphabetical order. So you can't say, oh, well, this guy's listed first, he's the likely starter. It doesn't work that way. So as of right now, most of the spots, well, I think all the ones that we already kind of knew, like there's no oars with those. Like your starting left tackle is Trey Zoon. Your starting quarterback is Connor Wickman. Nick Scorton and Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart, they're starters. Like we all knew that. Torian York, starting middle linebacker. But a couple of interesting notes. I think number one for me, and so there's no or here. So I'm taking this. I'm taking their word for it. This could be wrong by the time Saturday gets here, but on the offensive line, they have three solidified starters. They do not have an or designation next to their name. So left tackle Trey Zoon, left guard Chase Pasantis. We knew that. But right guard, penciled in with no or next to his name, is Armaje Reed Adams, the Kansas transfer. Now, we talked last week about some experimentation that was going on with the offensive line. They were looking at Reed Adams at right tackle, and Mark Naboo or Cam Dewberry at right guard, with Cooley Faiu, the Utah transfer, at center, and no Ruben Fothery in that lineup. Because I thought he would be your starting right tackle coming into the year, and then I think he was there the first week of camp, and then they kind of moved Reed Adams out there to see, hey, what do we have with him at tackle? Can he play it? Is he our best one? Do we need to, like we should look at that and see if he is. It looks like from this depth chart that they have settled on Reed Adams as the starting right guard. So what that means is now there's a battle at right tackle between Crownover and Ruben Fothery. I would lean heavily to seeing Ruben Fothery take the field as your starter at right tackle on Saturday. But what's interesting is, in all of those, when people would talk about, oh, they're looking at Reed Adams at right tackle, and they were like, oh, if we do that, it'll be Cooley from the Utah kid. It'll be Cooley at center, and then Mark Naboo at right guard, and then Reed Adams at right tackle. Or if it's not that, it'll be Mark Naboo at center, and then Reed Adams at right guard, Fothery right tackle. And the whole time I'm like, why can't Cooley start at center anyway? And I think, and that's what's listed here. Like there's a battle at center between Cooley Faiu and Mark Naboo. So it's not like this set in stone thing, like those two lines that I just talked about are your only options. There's still a battle going on at center between those two guys. There's still a battle at right tackle, although I think that one's probably a little more favored toward one side, with Fothery being the best bet there. But very intrigued to see with what they do at center. But I love, if this is the lineup, and I'm taking their word for it, I'd love this. I thought that, I think this is their best chance to get the best five on the field. And what you can do, like I've said over and over, I think Chase Pasantis is going to play at an all-conference type of level this season. I've got a ton of faith in him. Just a big, strong dude at guard, can move people in the run game, will look for work in pass pro and not give up any ground in pass pro. But Reed Adams, on the opposite side at guard, 6'5", 330, fifth-year player from Kansas. Just a big physical, like the run game is what he does best, is run blocking. And I would rather have that. I'd rather have your two guards be these, road grading type of run blockers. Uh, and they're both pretty great, like pretty good in pass pro too. Like Reed Adams, he's pretty light footed. He's got long arms. I thought he showed very well in pass pro in the spring game. I know that's just one instance, but even you watch some Kansas tape from last year, and he's handling Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat just fine. And those were two absolute stud defensive tackles for the Texas Longhorns. So I think this gives me a lot of hope that A&M will run the ball very effectively, and I think that's kind of the theme. Like, as much as I love Connor Wigman, Colin Klein's thing is, I mean, it's getting it's getting the ball to your playmakers and scheming guys open in the passing game, but it's also creativity and some ground and pound stuff in the run game. And I think these two guys at guard are going to be a terrific tandem. But big fan of what they're doing there. At receiver, pretty interesting. I think if you followed it closely, you kind of already knew this. Noah Thomas is your starter, of course, at the X receiver. Ja'Day Walker will start at Z, and then Cyrus Allen, the Louisiana Tech transfer, will start at the slot. Moose Muhammad, who most people thought is a top 3 guy, is listed as second string behind Ja'Day Walker at the Z receiver. I think he's going to play a lot. I think those 4 guys are going to play a ton. What's not listed here, or I guess who's not listed here, is Terry Bussey. I think that's the trump card that Elko's going to hang on to for a few more days until Saturday. I actually caught a little bit of Marcus Freeman's press conference today at Notre Dame. He was asked about Terry Bussey. I think they're aware that he's practicing on offense. And Coach Freeman was like, yeah, like we don't know where he's going to play. We don't know if he's going to line up at running back or receiver or slot or I think Freeman said, they expect Bussey to return kicks and punts against them this Saturday. But as far as on actual offense, they don't really know what to expect. So they're kind of preparing for it all, for anything that the Aggies might throw at them with Terry Bussey. But he is listed as the number 1 punt returner and the main kick returner, along with Le'Veon Moss. So you're going to see number 2 in maroon and white field some kicks this weekend and probably get some run on offense. I'm really intrigued to see how they use him. I think it's an interesting storyline. On defense, there's some interesting stuff here. So we talked about the D-line. 3 of those spots are solidified, no oars next to their names. At one defensive end, you have Nick Scorton as your starter, Joshua Seliskar, the UCF transfer, as his backup. At defensive tackle, I think this is probably the 3 technique. Shamar Turner, listed at 6'4", 300 pounds. Second team All SEC a year ago. He's your starter at the 3 tech. And then my man, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, listed as a second string or along with Rodis Johnson, the transfer from Wisconsin. So I think you'll see all 3 of those guys. And then at the other tackle spot, DJ Hicks or Albert Regis. So 6'5", 300-pound true sophomore, or the 6'2", 310-pound fourth-year player from LaPorte. I think those guys will rotate probably more than any on the defensive line, and maybe even trade off. I think they probably swap out like within the same series, and maybe you see Albert Regis on first and second down, you see David Hicks on third down, and I think you see both of them a lot in games this fall. The other defensive end, Shamar Stewart, 6'6", 290 pounds, true junior. He's set to have a really big year. Behind him is Malik Silla, 6'6", 245. What's interesting to me about this, and I went back and looked at some depth charts at A&M from when Mike Elko was here. I looked at 2020, I looked at 2021. I didn't see this position on here, so maybe this is a new thing. I guess Duke just doesn't do depth charts. I could not find one online. So if you have a Duke depth chart from 2023 or 2022, send it my way because I could not find it. But there's a position called Jack, which I'm assuming this is like a, outside linebacker, edge rusher type of guy that there will be certain packages for this position. And the starter is number 18, Cassius Howell, transfer from Bowling Green, and behind him is Ryland Kennedy, up to 6'4" and 240 pounds. I bet he got here at close to 190, maybe 200 pounds. So he's made a big jump in his physique, and I think both those guys are certainly guys to watch off the edge. The will linebacker spot still not settled. There's a couple spots on here where there are three ors, and this one is one where it's for the starter, not second string. So, like we said last week, Solomon DeShields, the transfer from Pitt, Damian Sanford, and Scooby Williams are all listed as ors. So co-starters for that will linebacker spot. Likely a competition still going there. At the nickel, so this is where you see a little bit, this is one of the few places where you see someone's name at two different spots. You didn't see that really anywhere else on the depth chart unless I missed something. But Tyreek Chappelle is listed as your starting nickel. He's listed as an or with Jaden Hill. Side note, very, very dumb thing that my good friend Carter Carls pointed out today. Jaden Hill, who could be your starter at nickel, it's going to be him or Chappelle, will have to sit out the first half of this game because of a targeting penalty that he got while he was at Florida against Florida State 9 months ago in a game where for a team that went 5-7, didn't play in a bowl. This is just so dumb. And it's surprising to no one that the NCAA would do such a dumb thing, like make a guy sit out after transferring schools and no bowl game, and 9 months later, after the fact, oh, you have to sit out for a half of football because we thought you had targeting on that play. Just incredibly dumb stuff from the NCAA. But I think Chappelle starts. If you do see Jaden Hill, it won't be till the second half due to that penalty. And then at corner, 5-man battle here, looks like, for two spots. At one corner spot, you have Tyreek Chappelle or B.J. Mays or Javon Thomas. At the other spot, you have Will Lee III, the transfer from Kansas State, or Des Ricks, the transfer, true sophomore from Alabama, former 5-star prospect. Those I would think. So I think Chappelle starts at nickel and is not one of your outside corners, but any two of those other four, it wouldn't shock me to see them run out there. If it's Will Lee and B.J. Mays, if it's B.J. Mays and Des Ricks, if it's Will Lee and Des Ricks, if it's Javon Thomas and B.J. Mays, it could be any combination of those four. And I think, once again, a bunch of these guys are going to play. I think on defense, especially defensive line, in the secondary, maybe that second linebacker spot, you're going to see a lot of guys rotating in and out, and a lot of different guys log playing time this Saturday, not just against the more cupcake games on the schedule, but I think in the big games like this weekend, you're going to see a lot of different guys getting snaps on defense. At one safety spot, Bryce Anderson, he's the lone starter. There's no or there. We all know what he can do. At the other safety spot, there's a three-way battle between Dalton Brooks, Trey Jones, the grad transfer from Central Michigan, or Marcus Ratcliffe. So those are three ors at the other safety spot. I would think Dalton Brooks takes the field first, and maybe there's a package where you have Bryce, Dalton Brooks, and Trey Jones on the field at the same time, and just trying to play some different matchups and see what they can do on the back end. Your place kicker appears to be Randy Bond. Coach Elko has raved about him in press conferences. I know Aggie fans are pretty tough on our kickers. We've had some great ones. We've had some very average ones over the years. Bond has the ability. He's hit some from 50 plus. It's just the consistency, and playing without a special teams coach is probably where you see his struggles. Like you see the struggle of not having a coach the most. It's not like you have a kicker that is Jimbo was he teaching him how to kick? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So Randy Bond with an actual special teams coach. Well, let's hope he's a little more consistent this season. Tyler White, he's your punter for the next 4 years. He's tremendous. And then Jacob Graham is your holder. Great name. And then Tyler White, the punter, is also the holder. We talked about kick returner Le'Veon Moss. A lot of folks don't like that. I tend to agree. It was different when you had A-Chain. Like, obviously, you want the fastest player on your team who's just an incredible player and athlete. You want that guy returning kicks because Exhibit A against Alabama, that changes the tide of the whole game when you house one in that kind of environment and situation. So, but Moss, it's different with him. I think this probably would have been Reuben Owens had he been healthy. But with him out, it may be like this is one of those things where he's just like the lead blocker type of guy. But even then, I would prefer our lead back not be in the line of fire on kickoffs. He's too valuable. But these coaches know more than we do, so we'll have to trust them to do what's right. So I think I hit everything on the depth chart, but I like what they've done on the offensive line, or at least what it appears that they are trying to do. Putting Reed Adams at right guard. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot here that we didn't already know. I think that's probably the biggest piece. Maybe Cyrus Allen being the full-time starter at the slot. Maybe a little bit of a shock to some folks, but I'm expecting some big things out of him. Also, Trey Watson is your starting tight end. So number 84, 6'5", 250 from Fresno State. He's your main guy. You will see multiple tight end packages, some 12 personnel and things like that this weekend. I would assume the second string tight end's a three-way battle between Shane Calhoun, Donovan Green, and Melon Orstrom. The kid from Sweden. I would think that Melon Orstrom is your is your tight end too. But we'll see. We'll see how they play that. Looking at Notre Dame and their depth chart, so I don't think that we talked about their O-line plan. So we had Ryan Roberts on like right before fall camp started, and then he's like, this offensive line is talented, but they're very young and inexperienced. At that point, he was like, oh, there's less than 20 career starts that are going to be on the starting line. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a concern. Well, then the guy that was going to start at left tackle, he gets hurt. He's out for the year. That was Charles Jagasaw. They've got high hopes for him. He was a very highly rated prospect, 6'7", 330, big athletic dude. Not a great player yet, but will probably get there at some point. And he only had one start, so they were going to plug in Tosh Baker. That's what I thought, fifth-year senior, former five-star prospect. But it appears that Tosh Baker has lost that battle to a true freshman, Anthony Knapp. Anthony Knapp is a 6'4", 290-pound true freshman who I think was a composite four-star, but not like a super highly rated one. And I'll be honest, I watched the spring game. I think the kid has a lot of talent and a ton of potential. But to ask a kid who's a true freshman in his very first game of college football, who's 6'4", 290, going against 6'6", 290 and 6'4", 295 or 290, future first round, second round NFL draft picks in a College Station at Kyle Field with 105,000 at night, that's tough. Like any way you spin that is not a good situation to have that be your left tackle in this game. So it's been talked to death kind of on Twitter message boards, but you can't overstate it. Like that is bad. I would assume Notre Dame's coaches are extremely worried about how they're going to block A&M because there are 4 or 5 guys that are going to be draft picks. There's probably more than that, but like high draft picks, like first round, second round, next spring, next April. So, that's tough. On the other end, well, we don't talk about a lot because I think Notre Dame likes this kid. I think he is athletic. He'll be a good player. But the right tackle is Emil Wagner, who is, I think, a third-year guy, 6'6", 290. I mean, you look at him in pads, you're like, this is a right tackle in a Power Five conference, and not that he's going to be a bad player. I think he could be a very good player, but there's a thing called physics where it doesn't really matter what like how good your technique or how strong you are. If there's guys that are bigger or the same size as you that are uh, you know third and fourth year players who are physical and have the technique that a guy like Nick Scorton has the explosive ability and strength that Shamar Stewart has. That's rough, man. I mean, if they had two tackles that were talented kids that were 6'7", 330 on each side, then I'd be like, okay, that may be a little tougher to handle. A little bit bigger guys that can slow our guys down if they get their hands on them. But man, that's rough. That's a tough matchup for these kids in their first starts. First starts for both of those guys. Neither one has started a football game in college. And then at left guard. In talking to Ryan Roberts, he said, "Oh, like less than 20 starts." Well, 13 of those 20 were from one guy who got beat out this fall in Pat Coogan. Pat Coogan started every game for them last season, and then was in a battle with him and Rocco Spindler, and then true sophomore, or sorry, redshirt freshman, not has not played in a game, I don't think, or maybe if he has, he definitely hasn't started. Maybe he's played mop up, but Sam Pendleton, and highly rated kid, 6'4", 305, beat out some veteran guys, that's a positive thing. But once again, your entire left side has never started a college football game, and their first game ever starting is on the road at Kyle Field in a night game, first game of the year, first game of a new coach, where the energy is going to be off the charts. And yeah, it's probably the biggest. It's certainly one of the biggest factors in kind of my feel on this game, on this matchup. It's not the only one, but man, it's just such a key position for one side to have such a decided advantage, which I think A&M has. So now the other spots: center Ashton Craig, right guard Billy Strouth. I believe both those guys started the final three games of last season, played well. The coaches they love them up there. All the the Notre Dame folks I listen to think they're pretty good players. So I don't think this is some scrub offensive line, across the board that Notre Dame or that A&M is just gonna, you know, completely dominate. But there's a very, very decided advantage to A&M in this game. With, I mean, there's six starts on this offensive line. There's one third year player, sorry, two third year players and a true freshman and two sophomores. I mean, that's not good. That's not where you want to be. So um, I think we're definitely going to have more, on Wednesday's show. But um, man, that's tough for Notre Dame. Okay, so elsewhere on the Notre Dame depth chart, so there's a couple of things I want to touch on with not just the depth chart, but with kind of their whole vibe at Notre Dame. Um, Trying to sound like a as objective as I can here, which I know is an impossible feat. Um, but so Notre Dame seems very confident in their team, which they should be. They have a very good football team. Their defense was fantastic a year ago. They upgraded at quarterback. Um, they brought in a new coordinator on offense. It's Marcus Freeman's third year. They have depth. They have talent. All that good stuff. Offensive line, obviously, big question, but something that kind of irks me when I hear it, and it's definitely it falls under the coach speak umbrella, is when and even the media umbrella, when a team, when someone says about their team that they cover or that they coach, and they're like, oh, this is the deepest blank room we've had ever. this is the deepest receiver room we've had in 20 years. This is the deepest linebacker room we've had since 1920. I'm like, okay, so you're saying that like being deep with players who are above average or good doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, if you're deep, if you have a true two deep of all NFL players like Alabama and Georgia have, then that's great. Then that's what depth is. If you have guys that are like, oh, like we have a freshman who's really talented, we think he'll be good. We have a redshirt sophomore that hasn't started yet but has a lot of ability. That's not being deep at a position. If you have like, unless you've got, without a doubt, proven guys, like it's just kind of a false. It's kind of a false message. Like you're saying, oh, like it's saying this is the best linebacker room we've had or the best receiver room we've had in a long time or ever. And if your top end talent isn't as good, it doesn't matter how deep you are. You know, if you're deep with above average players who don't suck but aren't elite, what does that really matter? You know, in terms of being a elite football team. You know, I just don't understand that. But I say all that to say that Notre Dame thinks that this is the deepest linebacker room they've ever had, the deepest receiver room they've had in a long time. And I want to talk about their receivers because they love their receivers like their media do. Apparently, from talking to some folks up there, I don't really know why they are so optimistic. I mean, to be frank, I don't think I would trade A&M's receiver room for theirs, and that's like our biggest weakness. That's what every A&M fan would say. Oh, like I love our defense, I love our quarterback, but I don't know about our receivers. You know, like that's kind of our unknown at the moment. And they've got some guys. You saw on their depth chart, they have three receiver spots, and they also like every starter has an or next to him. They think they have a top six of guys who are going to get in the game and play most of the snaps. But like they got Jaden Greathouse, who was a true freshman last year, injured, I think had a knee injury and came back. He's fully healthy. Westlake kid, good player. I like what he can do. Kind of a tweener. I thought he may be a tight end H-back type coming out, but he's full-time receiver, and that's what he's going to play for Notre Dame. They have a guy who was a lacrosse player who's actually reminds me a lot of Anaya Smith. Very quick, seems to kind of always be open, plays with a lot of effort in Jordan Faison. But then you have guys like, I don't see a lot of difference makers. Like they got Bo Collins from Clemson. He never did anything at Clemson. Like there's no track record of being an awesome player at Clemson. I know they've had their struggles on offense in Clemson, South Carolina, but I don't think that the offense was holding Bo Collins back. I just think, he's a fine player. He's not an elite player. Chris Mitchell from Florida International, very fast kid, over 1,000 yards a year ago for FIU, playing in the CUSA. Yeah, that's cool. We got some guys from some lower conferences that we like. We don't think they're gonna set the world on fire and be. They got the OC from LSU from the past couple of years, Mike Denbrock. I don't know if they're expecting these guys to be Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but they're probably not going to be that. So I don't know. I mean, they talk about, we have the best secondary in the country, which I'm not going to argue with that. They have a great secondary, but the confidence in the receivers, I don't quite understand for them yet. But honestly, a pretty good test, a pretty good first test for our defensive backs, a position that was so porous and much maligned a season ago. That really held the team back. So great first test. I may eat my words next week, up here talking all this mess. But where else? So they're linebackers. They've got 5 or 6 guys that are probably going to play. Mostly big-time recruits, very athletic kids. That's something that I've got my eye on, is their linebacker room. And really this whole team. But I need to get a sip of water before I finish this thought real quick. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. I've got some comments here from Joe Long. I think Joe Long's a Notre Dame fan. You have to understand we've had nothing for years in our wide receiver room. I get that. I can understand that. When you go from now, I will give Notre Dame some credit here. They were beat up pretty bad at receiver last year. Guys getting hurt, missing games, that sort of thing. So just to have a room that's fully healthy with some guys that have some talent, I can understand that if that's where your confidence is coming from. And Mike Denbrock is a guy that wants to open it up and get the ball downfield. So if that's what the synopsis is, then okay, I would tend to agree that that's a reason for optimism for them. So appreciate these comments, Joe. This is good stuff from a Notre Dame fan. Only problem in the linebacker room is Kaiser. He's the captain of the year. Sorry, he's the captain, but only guy that really played last year. I think Drake Bowen is the other starter. He was a guy that A&M recruited. Super athletic, super active at linebacker, but a young kid. So certainly something to watch there. But my thought, sorry for getting sidetracked. I have the way my screen is set up, I'm covering up comments, so I didn't want to do that. And certainly wanted to get Joe's comments on there. So appreciate that for commenting. But here's my thing with how I kind of see this game playing out between the Aggies and the Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame has two defensive tackles who are very, very good. The main one, Howard Cross, he's an elite player, All-American last year, preseason All-American this year, will get drafted next year, kind of like a miniature Aaron Donald type. Not that he is that good, but that type of player, and he plays with a ton of effort. Like he's a player that you definitely want on your team. But he's 285 pounds, I think, going off the depth chart here. Yes, he is 6'1", 288. So not the biggest guy at defensive tackle. The other guy, Riley Mills, pretty active as a pass rusher. 6'5". Let me find him here. 6'5", 295. Fifth year player. Cross is a sixth year player. And this is probably like along with the secondary, like the defensive line is certainly a strength for Notre Dame, but it's primarily the two guys inside. The defensive end, Jordan, I think Jordan Botello is how you say it. He's a fine player, very veteran, just not some menacing presence off the edge. I like the other end, R.J. Oben. He came over from Duke, very, very good pass rusher. Iffy in the run game, we'll see how that goes. But that's kind of my point is, they're not huge up front. They have 288 and 295 at defensive tackle. A&M fans are probably used to seeing 320, 315 at defensive tackle with Alabama, with LSU, and those types. And with the youth at linebacker, I think A&M can run on this team. I really do. I think that's probably the plan that Colin Klein's going to have is to, Colin Klein loves eye candy. He loves the motion, the different formations, making you think one thing and then doing another. And I think these Notre Dame linebackers are very quick to read and react. And I think it's going to get them in trouble and get them out of position against the A&M run game. And that's why I go back to the A&M side of this thing. Why I wanted a 330-pound guard in Reed Adams is, you got 35, 40 pounds on the guy across from you, the defensive tackles that you're going to be blocking. I just think if we can get some good, it's always been the technique thing the last 2 years with the A&M O-line. if we can coach these guys up and work these double teams, and I think you can move these guys off the ball, and with some with a tough back in Le'Veon Moss, a big O line. I think we average 320 ish, 320, 325 on the O line amongst our starters. That's what I see happening. I think you know for Notre Dame, I think maybe Chris Mitchell's ready. Maybe a, you know, Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse. Maybe those guys can get open deep, and Leonard can hit some deep shots. Or Leonard, incredibly athletic, can kind of escape from the pocket and chew up some yards on the ground. But because here's the thing, I don't think that Notre Dame can really run against A&M's front. I think that's going to be the plan for A&M. On the other side of this, like, hey, we're going to try to mash these guys. We're going to, take our big 330-pound offensive guards and double team their undersized tackles and, get to the second level, block these linebackers, do some motion, some, counters, some jet sweeps, all these kinds of things that Klein likes to do. That's kind of my key to this game on how Klein chooses to attack Notre Dame. That's just my take on it. But want to save some of that for Wednesday's show when we get Robert on. But yeah, I mean, I wrote down not an overly big football team, and that's not a necessarily a knock, because I think with Cross's, like, Howard Cross is that good because he's not, like, if he was 330, he couldn't move the way he does and be as disruptive. So I think you don't want a guy like him being that big, but on the defensive line, on their offensive line, they're not the size that you would see from an LSU or an Ole Miss or Mississippi State even in some years. So I just think it's a different looking football team than what A&M fans are probably used to. Now, if this is last year, they've got huge tackles, huge guards, big bruising running back with Audric Estime. That would look more like an SEC team. So, but that's not where they are this year. Those guys are in the NFL. So it's an intriguing matchup between these two squads. So that's one thing I did want to bring up. The first game of the year, week 0, this past Saturday, was Georgia Tech and Florida State. I think that game lived up to the hype. It was entertaining. It was fun to watch. It was a good football game. I don't know how good the teams are, but it was a good game. Good to watch. Not a ton of miscues. Certainly there were some, but I think this game between these two teams, I think it lives up to the hype. I really do. It's going to live up to the hype. It's game day. It's it's Elko's first game, college game day, night game at Kyle Field. Elko's former team, former quarterback, pardon. But yeah, like, this is not going to be a snoozer of a game, And I'll give a caveat. Notre Dame played a great game in Texas 6-7 years ago, or maybe longer, against the Texas Longhorns, and that was a great game. Everybody watched that one, and Texas is back, and then they go 5-7, and Notre Dame goes 4-8, and I would highly, highly doubt that these two teams do that the rest of this year, regardless of the outcome. But I think Notre Dame is a very good football team. I think A&M is a very good football team. Probably 2 of the top 15 teams in the country. And I think it's the best game of the day. I know you got Georgia Clemson and that sort of thing, but I think this is where I think they made the right call with game day. There's no doubt. We've still got Joe Long in the chat. Yes, I do remember Logan Diggs and Love. Jeremiah Love is a very athletic running back for Notre Dame. Great speed, catches the ball very well. That's another way that if our D line is just tearing up their O line in the run game and in the drop back passing game, I think you have to try to get the ball in in the hands of a Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price at running back. Those guys can make big plays. It's not all on the receivers. Obviously, Chris Mitchell, he appears to be healthy. Their tight end, excellent tight end, can make some incredibly difficult catches and move the chains. So it's going to be a dogfight. There's no doubt about it. But we'll talk more about the game on Wednesday. Real quick, just some kind of just a little teaser of the weekend as far as week one goes. Thursday, the big one here is North Dakota State at Colorado, 7 p.m. on ESPN. I believe this is at 9.5 for Colorado. I like them to cover that, to be quite honest. I know a popular pick is going to be the North Dakota State, man. They're the FCS powerhouse, national championships and all that stuff. Colorado is soft, they're flashy, and yada yada. And trust me, I get it. But when you look at Colorado's roster, and at least at their starting lineups, the amount of speed, and now even in the trenches, the amount of size that they have, I don't think this is going to be a super close game. Montana State did whip New Mexico, but they were favored in that game. Montana State was. New Mexico was lucky to be hanging around. I like Colorado to cover that, and maybe even quite handily. Friday's the day that's just it's a snooze fest, man. Like we couldn't get any better games than this. I mean, Florida Atlantic at Michigan State. You've got Temple at Oklahoma. First look at Jackson Arnold for the Sooners. TCU at Stanford. 9:30 on ESPN. I'm kind of surprised it's not a conference game with as crazy as things have gotten. So it's just kind of, you're going to have it on in the background, but you're not going to be watching that closely because it's just not very interesting, to be quite honest. T. Rickeyson, yes, I did watch SMU. A lot of folks picking them in the ACC in the preseason for the ACC to do some damage. They looked flat awful in that game. And Nevada is a bad football team, and they probably should have won that game. I thought SMU was the worst. I think they showed the worst of any team on the weekend. So, definitely not sure they can make a bowl with their ACC schedule now. But Saturday, it's not. I struggle with this because, as a fan, I like to have. Well, now I'm torn because I've loved the buildup of this Notre Dame game. I really have. But as a fan, and I know our coaching staff would prefer, hey, let's play, Sam Houston. Let's play Austin Peay or Illinois State or Chattanooga or Portland State or Akron. Let's get a warm-up. Let's get a win under our belt. Get our guys some reps. That kind of thing. But as a fan, you look at this and you're like, man, where's the big games? Like where's, they don't do those one-off kind of, and those were at NFL stadiums, which kind of sucked anyway. But you just don't see a ton of marquee matchups in this week one. Obviously, Clemson, Georgia is the big one. Let me pull up the line. I've got my unofficial sports book of the Ineligible podcast. Minus 13.5 for Georgia. I like the Bulldogs there. I really do. I think Clemson they're struggling to figure it out on offense. I don't think they get it done against Georgia. Miami at Florida. I said this a couple weeks back. I think Miami whoops the dog out of Florida. I know it's in Gainesville. It's in the swamp. It's a hard place to play. But Miami really hit the portal hard, brought in some big-time players. Cam Ward at quarterback, Damian Martinez at running back. They got some guys on defense. I'm selling every piece of Florida stock that I've got. So that's where I'm at there. Sneaky good game. Sneaky good if you're not an A&M or Notre Dame fan and you just want to watch something that's totally sick. UNLV at Houston. UNLV led by Barry Odom, former Mizzou head coach, former Arkansas DC. Very good coach at Houston. who is under new leadership with Willie Fritz coming over from Tulane. So that's at 6 p.m. on ESPN. Sorry, on FS1. Yeah, if you don't care at all about A&M or Notre Dame, then you should check that out. It should be interesting for sure. Fresno State at Michigan. I've got a good friend who's a big Fresno State fan, listens to this show, my old roommate. Sorry, buddy. Michigan is going to uh, crush them. Yeah, I mean, even the late game, or not even late, uh, Wyoming at Arizona State. I mean, that's going to be ugly. Arizona State's trying to figure things out. Wyoming, they're all defense. They're slow the game down, that sort of thing. Just not super interesting. And then of course, let me get down here. Sunday, you've got LSU versus USC. I don't know what to think about that. I mean, we haven't talked about SEC or predictions and that sort of thing, but LSU thinks they can be a playoff team, which they can. That's within reality, no doubt about it. If they go and lose to USC, that's it. I mean, not that they can't bounce back, but I mean, it's going to get a lot harder than LSU for LSU than playing USC. So yeah, and USC, Lincoln Riley, fraud alert, all that kind of thing. Uh, Lost the number one pick in the draft, Caleb Williams. They like Miller Moss. I've got Zachariah Branch on all of my college fantasy teams. I think he's outstanding. Uh, they finally fired Alex Grinch, who was a terrible defensive coordinator. They actually hired the North Dakota State, the aforementioned Bison. They hired their head coach to be their DC. So they could do some things. I mean, I'm not saying I think LSU is a 6.5 point favorite here, but I don't really know. You know, I don't think they fixed their secondary. I think USC and Lincoln Riley are going to score points. If Garrett Nussmeier is not ready and not able to play consistent football, this could get bad. It could be bad. Yeah, definitely bet the over with you on that. Monday, Boston College at Florida State. This is, I mean, actually, with Florida State losing, I kind of like this. Boston College has a very exciting dual threat quarterback in Thomas Castellanos. If he can do to them what Haynes King did to them last weekend, then man, I mean, Florida State might be down bad in just just 2 games into the season. I don't mean to poke fun. A lot of A&M fans hate hate Florida State. After the whole Jimbo debacle and you we hated them because they ended up being right. They talked all this crap that Jimbo was over the hill and washed up, and pretty much everything they said came to fruition, and they kind of nailed it. But A&M fans hate them for that. Florida State fans still hate A&M, even though we've admitted, like, hey, Jimbo was a mistake. They, I wish Florida State would have been good this year, and maybe they still can be. But man, give me a Florida State A&M matchup in the playoff, and that will be some of the most vitriol and hate-filled fan interaction that you're going to find. That'd be fun for sure. So yeah, I mean that's your week 1 slate. There's not a whole lot. I'll try to go back and look at Saturday, but um, you know, actually there's one that I'm interested in, and if I can find a good tailgate and that's got some TVs, I'll probably be flipping between these two with Clemson and Georgia. But Penn State at West Virginia. West Virginia's got some guys now, and this is in Morgantown, in the sticks, the hills of West Virginia. Garrett Green at quarterback, Jaheim White at running back, C.J. Donaldson, kind of a do-it-all, tight end, running back, H-back kind of guy. Neil Brown really turned things around for them last year. He was on the hot seat. Penn State, that was my whole team last week. Didn't really know what. I think they have a lot of talent, great talent on defense. Former 5-star quarterback. former five-star receiver Julian Fleming from Ohio State, two great running backs. They finally have a really creative offensive coordinator in Kodal Nicky from Kansas. So can they, you know, I feel like Notre Dame and Penn State have kind of been in this offensive purgatory. Like both teams have had great receivers in the past, and they've just lost it. They haven't had that for a while. And Penn State is all running game and good O line, very very average to below average quarterback play. Um, if they can get it right and get some good scheme on offense and maybe find a receiver or two, they could be dangerous. But if they haven't, if they go in there and if Garrett Green and Shaheem White just kind of run all over them, Green's a dual threat quarterback, so very interested in how that plays out. But that's one to watch for sure. Vatek at Vanderbilt, that's on ESPN. Don't really care for it. UConn at Maryland, Colorado State at Texas. That's also on ESPN. Curious to see. We had a Longhorn guy on last week. He's like, hey, with Michigan coming up, we're not going to do a whole lot, on offense. Maybe lean to Colorado State, at least on the as far as the betting goes, because they're probably a 36-point underdog, something like that. Something to watch for sure. I think they have a good coach up there as well, and Jay Norvell. Elsewhere, I mean, that's probably gonna do it for us today. I mean, there's just not a lot. I mean, Bama gets a cupcake. Oregon's gonna score 80 in their opener again, like last season. Um, I mean, UTEP at Nebraska. I'm intrigued by Dylan Raiola, the true freshman five-star. Nebraska, man, I should have bought them. That should have been my buy and not Miami. I know we're going back to the '90s here with these names, but they've got my attention for sure. But we're coming up on the hour, so I'll go ahead and get out of here. And yeah, man, it's freaking game week. For those of us, like, if you're listening to minute 57 of this show, then you're like me. That means you love this stuff. You love college football. This is your thing, and this is our week. This is where where another season starts, and I'm just excited as ever. So thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll talk to you guys on Wednesday. Thanks so much.